The Idaho sun did not shine in the summer of 1892. It burned. It was a heavy, relentless weight that pressed down on the dusty, unpaved streets of Boise. Lin Xiu stepped out of the small, one-room schoolhouse for the final time. The wooden door clicked shut behind her. The sound was as final as a heartbeat stopping in a quiet room. She clutched a worn leather satchel of books against her chest. The faded blue fabric of her dress felt like a second skin. It was thin, weary, and coated in a fine layer of trail dust. She stood on the porch for a long moment, breathing in the scorched air. She knew, with a crushing certainty, that she would never cross that threshold again. Only minutes ago, the school board had sat in a row like judges at an execution. They had not looked her in the eye. They didn't mention her flawless record of service. They didn't speak of the children who had finally learned to read under her patient gaze. They didn't care how well she taught or how much the students loved her. They dismissed her for one reason only. The world was changing, and the law was turning against her. She was Chinese. The air in the valley was thick with more than just the summer heat. It was thick with the tension of the new Geary Act. Across the country, the new law had made life even more uncertain for Chinese residents. The Geary Act required many immigrants to prove their right to remain in the only home they knew. For people without the right papers or white testimony, arrest and removal were real, daily fears. Lin Xiu knew enough about the law to understand the danger. She knew that a single missing document could change a life forever. She felt the legal papers tucked safely inside her dress. They were just thin sheets of parchment, but they were the only things standing between her and a world that wanted her gone. She began to walk. The wooden sidewalk groaned under her boots. Her head was held high. Her spine was a rod of tempered steel. She had learned long ago that dignity was the only thing a law could not steal. Fear was a cold stone sitting in her stomach. It sat there, heavy and sharp, as she passed the general store. The townspeople watched her from the shadows of the porch. She could feel their eyes tracking her movement. They were the eyes of people who had once thanked her for teaching their sons. Now, those same eyes were filled with a sudden, sharp distance. A heavy shadow suddenly stretched across the dry boards in front of her. The sound of slow, deliberate boots stopped her in her tracks. Lin Xiu looked up. Standing before her was Silas Sterling. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of the very mountains that rimmed the valley. He was broad-shouldered and tall. He was a man of the earth, weathered by wind and sun. Silas was one of the wealthiest cattle ranchers in the state. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his rugged face. His eyes were the color of a stormy Atlantic. They were gray, deep, and rimmed with an exhaustion that went beyond a simple lack of sleep. He was a widower. The town spoke of him in whispers and rumors. They said he was as silent as a canyon. They said his heart had died 3 years ago when the fever took his wife. Silas did not tip his hat in the traditional way. He did not offer a polite, empty smile. He simply looked at the worn leather satchel clutched against her chest. "I heard what the board did," Silas said. His voice was like gravel, shifting in a deep mountain stream. It was rough, low, and completely honest. Lin Xiu did not flinch under his gaze. She did not look away from those stormy gray eyes. "Then you know I am no longer your son's teacher," she replied. Her voice was clear and steady. It was the voice of a woman who had spent years perfecting a language that wasn't her own. "I know you have nowhere to go," Silas countered. He was blunt. He was a man who had no use for the fluff of polite conversation. The street was quiet. The townspeople were leaning out of their windows. They were waiting for a scandal. They were waiting for her to break and weep. "My children need a mother," Silas said. The words hit the air like a physical blow. Lin Xiu felt the oxygen leave her lungs for a split second. "And you need a home," he added. The silence that followed was deafening. The heat seemed to shimmer on the horizon like a ghost. "You are asking me to be a wife," she whispered. "I can run 1,000 head of cattle," Silas said. He looked toward the distant, jagged peaks. "I can build a kingdom out of grass and dirt, but I haven't learned how to give those children what they lost. My son barely speaks anymore. My daughter's hair is a bird's nest of tangles. The house is a tomb, Lin Xiu. It is a hard life I'm offering you, but it is a safe one. Under my roof, You will have a place that is yours. No frightened landlord will ever turn you out into the street again. As long as you are under my roof, you will not face this town alone." Lin Xiu looked down at her hands. They were small and slender. They were stained with the purple ink of the morning's last lessons. She thought about her cramped boarding house room. She thought about the owner who had stopped meeting her gaze yesterday. She thought about the sheriff who had started asking questions about her registration. She knew that without a protector, her days in Idaho were numbered. She knew how exposed she had become. Without help, every question about her papers could threaten the life she had built in Idaho. She looked back up at the man of iron. "I am a teacher, Mr. Sterling," she said. "I am not a ranch hand's wife." Silas didn't blink. "My children don't need a ranch hand's wife. They need someone who can teach them how to live again. I'll be at the livery stable at dawn. If you are there, we will go to the ranch. If you are not, I will not ask a second time." He turned on his heel. He walked away without looking back to see her reaction. The dust he kicked up swirled around her ankles. Lin Xiu stood alone as the sun began its slow, agonizing descent. The sky was turning the color of a bruised plum. That night, the inevitable happened. The owner of the boarding house knocked on Lin Xiu's door. The woman wouldn't even enter the room. She stood in the hallway, clutching her apron with trembling hands. "You have to be out by sunrise," the woman whispered. "I can't have the sheriff coming here and causing trouble. The men in town are talking about the new law. They say I'm harboring people who shouldn't be here. I'm sorry." Lin Xiu didn't argue. She didn't beg for more time. She spent the night packing the fragments of her life into a single trunk. She had a silver hair comb. It was the last thing her mother had touched before Lin Xiu left for America. She had a small stack of poems. Her father had hand-copied them with a brush and black ink. The characters were elegant and strong. They were a map of a home she could no longer return to. She had a heavy heart. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, she moved. The peaks were painted in shades of violet and fire. She walked to the livery stable. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. Silas was already there. He was hitching two massive draft horses to a heavy wagon. He saw her. He did not smile. He did not offer a hand in greeting. He simply pointed to the high seat of the wagon. "Put your trunk in the back, Pat," he said. When she tried to climb up, his hand shot out to help her. His palm was rough. It was calloused from years of rope, rain, and hard labor. But his grip was steady. It felt like warm stone against her skin. The journey took several hours. They crossed miles of dry, golden Idaho country. The wind whipped Lin Xiu's hair into her face. Silas respected her silence. He understood that she was mourning the woman she used to be. Finally, the Sterling Ranch appeared over the rise of a hill. It was massive. It stretched across miles of sun-baked grass beneath a pale blue Idaho sky. A two-story house sat near a grove of cottonwood trees. But as they drew closer, the beauty faded into a harsh reality. The porch was buried under a thick layer of gray dust. A broken shutter banged rhythmically against the side of the house. It sounded like a ghost knocking, asking to be let in. Two small children stood by the wooden fence. Leo was 7 years old. His face was set in a mask of premature sadness. Clara was only 4. Her golden curls were a matted mess of burrs and tangles. Her dress was torn at the hem and stained with dirt. Looking at them, Lin Xiu felt a sharp pang in her chest. She finally understood Silas's desperation. I wasn't looking for a cheap worker. He was a man drowning in a sea of grief. He was watching his children sink with him. The wagon came to a halt. The children didn't run forward with joy. They watched her like frightened children who had learned not to trust change. Silas climbed down. He reached up to help Lin Xiu. "This is Lin Xiu," Silas told the children. His voice was stiff. It was as if he had forgotten how to introduce someone to his family. "She's going to be staying here now." Leo looked at her sensible shoes. "Is she our new mother?" he asked. The question was a tiny, fragile thing. It hung in the air like a soap bubble. Silas looked away. He couldn't answer. The guilt on his face was as deep as a physical scar. Lin Xiu stepped forward. She didn't try to hug them or force a connection. She didn't try to force a fake smile. Instead, she knelt in the dirt. She put herself on their level. "I used to be a teacher," she said softly. "If you would like, perhaps I can be your friend first." Clara hid behind her brother's leg, but she didn't run away. The inside of the house was even lonelier than the outside. It smelled of stale air and old smoke. It felt like a place where time had stopped the moment the light went out of Silas's life. The first few days were a blur of exhaustion. Lin Xiu scrubbed years of grime from the kitchen. She threw open the heavy, dusty curtains. She let the Idaho sun pour into the cold rooms. She washed the children's clothes in big, galvanized tubs until her hands ached. She prepared their first hot, nutritious meal in months. But she was a teacher first. She knew that a clean house was just a shell. The real work was healing the spirits of the people inside it. Leo and Clara watched her from the safety of the doorways. They were silent observers of her every move. Lin Xiu never demanded their love. She simply kept showing up every single day. Love, she knew, was like a garden. You could not command it to grow. You could only prepare the soil and wait for the rain. One evening, while exploring the attic, she found a wooden trunk. Inside, buried under old blankets, was a half-finished quilt. It was a stunning pattern of stars and roses. The stitching was delicate and precise. Lin Xiu brought it down to the living room. That night, she sat by the hearth. The firelight danced on the walls. She began to sew. She used the skills her mother had taught her in a small house by the sea. Leo crept into the room. He sat on the floor near her feet. His eyes were fixed on the colorful fabric. "My mama was making that," he whispered. His voice was so quiet it was almost lost in the crackle of the logs. He reached out a small, trembling hand. He touched one unfinished corner of a rose. "Rose," she said she'd finish it before the first snow fell. His voice broke. He didn't cry. He just looked empty. Lin Xiu lowered her needle. She knew that some grief was too heavy for a child to carry alone. She had a beautiful eye for color. "Leo," Lin Xiu said softly, "she left this for you because she loved you. Would you like to help me finish it?" Leo shook his head. "I don't know how to sew." "I can teach you, she promised. Not to replace what she began, but to help her finish the gift she wanted you to have. For the first time since she arrived, Leo smiled. It was a fragile, flickering thing, but it was there. If this story of a family slowly finding its way back to hope is touching you, stay with us. And if stories of courage, kindness, and second chances speak to you, consider subscribing to the channel. On an isolated ranch, ordinary household things often carried memories that words could not. A quilt could hold a family history. A repaired coat could mean someone cared enough to keep you warm. As the weeks turned into a month, the ranch began to breathe again. The scent of fresh ginger and baking bread replaced the smell of dust. Lin Xiu began to teach the children every morning. They sat at the large oak table in the kitchen. They practiced their sums. They read aloud from her old books. Silas would often stand in the shadows of the hallway. He would listen in absolute silence. At first, he told himself he was just making sure the children were behaving. But as the days passed, he realized he was listening for her. He was listening to the way her voice calmed the air. He had forgotten what it felt like to have a home that didn't feel like a prison. He began to bring her small things. A handful of wildflowers he found by the creek, a new book he ordered from a catalog in the city, a piece of blue silk ribbon for her hair. How was a man trying to speak without using words? He was trying to tell her he saw her, but the world outside the ranch fence was not so kind. One afternoon, a group of riders appeared on the horizon. The dust they raised was a warning. They were led by a man named Miller. He was the local sheriff, a man with a tin star and a heart made of cold iron. Silas walked out to the porch to meet them. He stood squarely between the riders and the house. "Silas Cha!" the sheriff shouted from his horse. "We need to talk about that woman you've got living here." The folks in town are getting restless. They don't like a foreigner living on a prominent ranch. Silas stood his ground. His shadow was long and dark on the dirt. "This is my land," he growled, "and she is my wife." Lin Xiu, standing behind the screen door, gasped. The word wife echoed in the quiet air. They had never had a ceremony. They had never signed a paper together. But Silas was willing to let the entire town believe it if it bought Lin Xiu time. The Geary Act is clear. Silas, Miller said. She has to be registered with the government. If she doesn't have her papers, she's a criminal. Any question about her status will go through me, Silas said. His voice was a low rumble of thunder. You will not drag her out of my house. You will not touch a hair on her head. Now get off my property, before I lose the little bit of patience I have left. The men studied Silas's face. None of them seemed eager to test how serious he was. They turned their horses and rode away. But the silence they left behind was heavy. The encounter made one thing clear. Whatever the law said on paper, fear and prejudice were making Lin Xiu's life more dangerous. Lin Xiu stepped out onto the porch. Is it true? She asked. Will they come back with more men? Silas looked at her. For the first time, the storm in his eyes had cleared. Not while I'm drawing breath, he said, but Lin Xiu knew that hiding behind Silas's protection could not be her permanent answer. She realized she couldn't live in the shadows forever. She had to stand on her own 2 feet. The next morning, she didn't wait for permission. She gathered every document she owned. She put on her best dress. It was the one she had saved for graduation days. She pinned her hair back with her mother's silver comb. She asked Thomas Reed, one of the older ranch hands, to drive her into Boise. Thomas was a man of few words, but he respected Lin Xiu deeply. He was willing to stand as a witness for her character. In Boise, the government office was a cold, sterile place. Lin Xiu sat on a hard wooden bench for hours. She was questioned by men who looked at her as if she were a ledger entry. They asked about her father and her mother. They asked for proof that she had lived in Idaho for years. Thomas Reed stepped forward. He removed his hat and spoke with authority. She's been teaching children in this county for years. He told them. Lin Xiu produced her school records. She showed them letters of recommendation from parents. By late afternoon, officials had accepted her documents and begun the process of reviewing her case. It was not a complete victory yet, but it was proof that she had a path forward. For the first time in a year, she stopped running in her mind. When she returned to the ranch, the sun was setting. Silas was pacing the porch like a caged lion. When he saw the wagon, he jumped down. He was furious and terrified at the same time. You went into town without telling me, he shouted. I am not a child. Silas, she shouted back. Her voice rang out across the yard. I am a woman who has survived things you cannot imagine. I will not be hidden away like a shameful secret. I came here beside you, Silas, not behind you. Silas stopped mid-stride. The anger drained out of him. It was replaced by a profound realization. He reached out and took her face in his large hands. I sold my best breeding bull today, he whispered. His voice was trembling. I was going to spend every dollar I had making sure you had a fair chance. I was going to fight for you. Lin Xiu felt the tears finally spill over. Neither of them had realized what the other was willing to sacrifice. In that moment, the arrangement changed. It was about 2 people who had begun choosing each other before either of them was brave enough to say it. Silas leaned down and kissed her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Clara and Leo were watching from the window. Clara reached out and squeezed Lin Xiu's hand as she walked inside. The winter that followed was brutal. Deep snow had closed the roads and made travel nearly impossible. Silas worked until his fingers were blue to keep the cattle alive. Lin Xiu kept the hearth burning. She made sure there was always a pot of soup waiting. But in the middle of January, the real test arrived. Clara woke up in the middle of the night with a cry. Her skin was burning hot to the touch. A fever had come on suddenly, and there was no doctor who could reach them through the drifts. Silas was paralyzed. He stood by the bed, his face white with the memory of his first wife. I can't lose her, he choked out. I can't do this again. Lin Xiu stepped in front of him. Then don't, she said firmly. Go get more wood for the fire. Now, Silas. Lin Xiu was frightened too, but she forced herself to stay calm because Clara needed her. She offered Clara small sips of water and warm broth whenever the girl could manage them. A little ginger flavored the broth because it was familiar and comforting. For 3 days, Lin Xiu slept only in brief stretches beside Clara's bed. She talked to Clara, she told her stories of dragons in the sea, she sang old lullabies in a language the girl felt in her bones. Whenever Clara stirred, Lin Xiu was there to comfort her. Late on the third night, Silas sat on the floor by the bed. He put his head in his hands. "I buried their mother 3 years ago," he whispered. "I don't know how to bury my heart twice." Lin Xiu reached across the bed and took his hand. "Tonight, we do not think of graves," she said. "Tonight, we think of the morning." On the fourth morning, the sun broke through the clouds. The light hit the snow and turned the world into diamonds. Clara opened her eyes. She looked at Lin Xiu. "Mama," she whispered. The word was small, but it changed everything. Lin Xiu froze. She hadn't asked for that title. She hadn't expected it. Silas turned his head away, but Lin Xiu saw the tears on his face. Leo climbed onto the bed and put his head on Lin Xiu's shoulder. The only thing that mattered was the 4 people in that room. They were a family. Not by blood or by law yet, but by all the days they had chosen to remain beside one another. When spring finally arrived, the valley was a riot of color. Lin Xiu and the children finished the quilt. It was a masterpiece of 2 worlds becoming one. Silas called a preacher to the ranch. They stood under the cottonwood trees. Silas Sterling, take you. Lin Xiu, he said. He looked at her with absolute devotion. I promise you will never face this world alone again. Lin Xiu looked at him, her eyes bright. I choose this home, and all of you, in return. The world outside didn't change overnight. There were still people in town who looked away. But a few things did change. A neighbor brought over a basket of eggs. A mother asked if Lin Xiu would teach her daughter again. Lin Xiu opened a small school right there on the ranch. She taught the children of ranch hands and the children of the town. More than anything, she taught them to be curious about people who seemed different. Stories of the West are often remembered through cattle drives and railroads. But homes and classrooms shaped frontier communities too. Her greatest legacy was not that every prejudice disappeared. It was that some children grew up knowing a different way to see one another. Years later, Lin Xiu sat on the porch. The evening air was cooling. She watched Silas walking back from the barn. He reached the porch and took her hand. You're thinking again, he said with a smile. I'm remembering, she replied. Lin Xiu rested her head on Silas's shoulder. Years earlier, she had believed she needed someone to give her a home. Only now did she understand. A home was something they had built together. Lin Xiu closed her eyes. She was home. If Lin Xiu's journey stayed with you, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories from the American frontier. This story is a fictional Western romance inspired by life in the 19th century American West. Characters, dialogue, and events have been dramatized for storytelling. Historical references are included for context, and some details have been simplified for the narrative. AI tools may have assisted parts of the creative production. Final storytelling, review, and editorial direction were completed by the channel creator.